Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in early 2022, the Kremlin has done a good job of insulating ordinary Russians from the costs of the war. Clever monetary policy dampened the effects of sanctions, defence-related spending triggered a mini-economic boom, and Ukraine's occasional incursions into Russian territory were ultimately snuffed out. However, this might be about to change. In recent months, Ukraine's strike on oil refineries have pushed up fuel prices across Russia, triggering shortages and rekindling inflation-related anxieties about the wider Russian economy. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Ukraine manufactured a fuel crisis in Russia, and why this leaves both the Kremlin and the Russian central bank with uncomfortable dilemmas. Never miss an episode, and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So, to understand how Ukraine's strikes are affecting Russia, you need to know a bit about the oil industry. In short, when oil is pumped straight out of the ground, it's an unhelpful mix of different hydrocarbons that can't really be immediately used for anything, hence why it's called crude oil. Crude oil thus needs to be separated into usable petroleum products, like gasoline and diesel, and this process happens at refineries. Generally speaking, about 50% of the crude oil is turned into gasoline, 25% is turned into diesel, 10% is turned into jet fuel, the remainder is turned into funkier petroleum products with more specific uses. Anyway, as you probably already know, Russia produces a lot of crude oil, mostly via its oil fields in western Siberia. According to data from the EIA, Russia produced about 9.2 million barrels of crude oil a day in 2024, making it the third largest producer in the world after the US and Saudi Arabia. Slightly more than half of this crude oil, about 4.8 million barrels per day in 2024, is exported in unrefined form to third countries like China and India, who then refine that crude oil into usable petroleum products, which are then consumed domestically or exported again. The remainder, however, about 4.4 million barrels per day in 2024, is refined inside Russia. Most of this is then consumed by Russians, but some is exported as refined product to other countries like Turkey. In 2024, for instance, 3.9 million barrels per day were consumed domestically, while the remaining 500,000 were exported. Anyway, to this end, there were about 30 large oil refineries in Russia, mostly in the west of the country near the population centres, which are connected to the western Siberian oil fields via a network of pipelines. For the past 2 months or so, Ukraine has been targeting these refineries with long-range drones. At least 16 have been hit, some multiple times, and Ukraine has successfully carried out strikes against targets thousands of kilometres away, including the Neftekhim Salavat refinery in Bashkortostan. Estimates vary, but